Hello there, and welcome to The Meaningful Stitch. This is episode 24, and I'm Amy Palco, and I'm coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland, and this is my digital home from home, a place where I get to share with you my knitting practice and my knitting projects. Now, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2022. I have a lovely card to start us off that I've drawn for us from the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. So I'm going to do that first, and then I've got quite a lot of knitting to share with you after that. So the card that I drew for us is from this Wild Unknown Archetypes deck, which is a beautiful deck by Kim Krans. And this is the card that I drew, which is Agape. So I'm just going to read you the words from the guide. What if instead of putting yourself at the centre of your spiritual practice, you put God, Goddess, or nature at the centre? How would this change your approach? Such is the energy of Agape. It is alive when we are in awe and wonder, our breath taken away by the sacred force that surrounds us and asks for nothing in return. This card can indicate a spiritual initiation that stretches your capacity to love and serve. You sense the earthly as the heavenly, and vice versa. Such an initiatory moment can appear in any form, and like a healing balm to the modern soul, its effects last a lifetime. The Agape card may also suggest you reassess what you worship every day, consciously or unconsciously. What are you elevating? Where does the sacred ladder you climb ultimately lead to? Some beautiful questions there, and some invitations into deeper thought around, I think, particularly things like our craft and our knitting and artistic creative practice. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I've got quite a lot of knitting, as I mentioned, not least of what I'm wearing. Everything that I speak about today will be mentioned in the show notes. Now, the show notes are available. There's going to be a link in the description box, and that's going to take you to a Patreon post. That Patreon post is public, so it's open to everybody. You do not need to be a patron to see it. But what it does allow me to do there is to add in photographs of everything that I'm speaking about, and also links and extra text. So unfortunately YouTube limits the amount of text I can include and my show notes always seem to be pretty extensive. So over on the Patreon post I don't have those limitations, so or at least I haven't found them yet. That's not to say they don't exist. But yes, that's where all the show notes are. So if you're interested in any of the designs that I've knitted, or the yarns that I'm using, or anything else that I've mentioned, you'll find the information there. So the other thing I'm going to mention just before I get on to all of the lovely knitting is that my 2022 My Word Goddess readings are still available and will be available until the 31st of January. Now, these are readings which connect you, intuitive readings that connect you up to a goddess for the year, and are accompanied by a number of word suggestions that you might like to choose as your word for the year. Now, choosing a word for the year is a practice that I have done for many years now, and I find it a deeply supportive one, and much more open and invitational than making New Year's resolutions, much more sustainable too, and insightful, I think. So yes, if you would like to explore the practice of choosing a word for the year, but you are looking for some guidance around that, or you're looking for some support, then you might want to check out the My Word Goddess readings. And again, the link for that will be in the show notes. Okay, knitting. So, I have a couple of finished objects for you, and one of which is what I am wearing. So, isn't this just beautiful? I am so pleased with it. It's worked out so well. This is Vair by Gudrun Johnson, and it's from her book, The Shetland Trader 3 Heritage. And yes, it is the garment that is on the cover. So I'll just stand up so you can see it, or I'll bring myself up slightly. There we go. So you can see. Shall just kneel. There we go. So you can see that it has a lace body up to the chest, and then this is stranded colour work here. And the lace work is garter lace. So because you're doing it in the round, that means that you'll do like a lace round and then you'll do a pearl round to create the pearl bumps, to create the effect of the garter lace. There is also some waist shaping, which you can see here. And the bodice, once you get up to here, that's when you start to create steeks. And you create steeks for the armholes and for the neck shaping. Now, that was something that was completely new to me. I knew of it, but I had never done it myself. The only steek that I had done previously was on the Stone Crop cardie by Andrea Mowry, which I did, I think it was maybe 2020, although 2020 and 2021 are a little bit indistinct for me. I can't think why. But I think it was 2020 that I did that one. But it was a basic steek to turn what was essentially a pullover into a cardigan, so you were steeking straight up the front. But for this, you were creating shaping, and then you had these steek stitches which you then cut, well, you then reinforced, and then you cut, and then fastened tacked all of your steeks down at the very end. So I will insert a photograph so that you can see the inside of this, and you can see the steeks and how they're tacked down. But I had initially decided that I was going to tack them down to the sleeve to try and create a more, I suppose, a more coherent shift between the bodice and the sleeve. But actually that didn't work at all. So I unpicked all of that and I tacked the steeks down to the inside of the bodice, and that worked much, much better. I'm really pleased with my colours. I recognise that I've got much lower contrast in some of the colours, but I actually really like that, and I love the gradation of that through the lace also. The sleeves are huge and completely fabulous, but they did take a lot of knitting. So you are creating, unlike most sleeves where you are moving through a series of decreases, with these you're moving through a series of increases, so your sleeve knitting is getting bigger and bigger as you go along, and then you are going through a series of decreases to create this long elegant cuff of 2x2 rib. My yarn is this. It is looking slightly smaller than it did before. I think I've used around 200 grams of this, so I think I still have about 1,500 grams left on this cone. It is huge and it's very heavy. But I picked it up in a charity shop for £12. And it is marked as Shetland. Now, whether it is actually Shetland or not, I have no way of knowing. I don't know its provenance at all. However, what I can tell you is that it does feel quite crisp and crunchy to knit with. It's got quite a dry handle, and I think the reason for that is that it, as also with it being on a cone, I would expect it still to have its spinning oil in it. And so that proved, I think that proved true, because when I washed my swatch, I ended up with a much, much softer fabric than initially the yarn might have suggested. And that was greatly encouraging, because when I was knitting this beautiful jumper, I was thinking, oh gosh, wouldn't it be a shame if I do all of this work and I end up with this beautiful piece, but actually the yarn is not comfortable to wear. And so there was a certain points throughout the knitting process where that doubt came into my mind again, and whenever that happened, I just put my hand inside my project bag where my swatch was, and gave my swatch a wee rub and went, oh no, it's going to be soft, it's going to be okay. because really it is quite miraculous, the shift that some of these yarns move through the washing and blocking process. It really does change the quality and the feel of the look of the fabric itself. And that's certainly what's happened here. So this is softened up an awful lot. It really does feels completely fine against my skin. It doesn't feel itchy or scratchy or uncomfortable. It's definitely woolly. And it's definitely on the more rustic side. I don't think I am necessarily very sensitive to rustic yarns, but that said, it certainly doesn't feel uncomfortable to wear next to skin, and certainly with the long polo neck, which of course took a long time as well, as you can see. That's right next to my neck, and I know some people have very sensitive. If you're going to feel any kind of toothiness of the yarn or irritation of the skin, it's quite often around this part of the body, but again, I don't feel that at all. So it feels very warming and very lovely. So it really was quite an adventure knit. I should also say about the other yarns, they were actually all scraps from Hillesvåg Solje from various different projects. So this colour here, this kind of goldy colour, and this darker orange, that's Rodgul and, no it's not, it's ochre and cognac. So this is the ochre and this is the cognac. And that was from my quadrangle spires, which you might remember. I think I showed that in the previous episode, so episode 23. And then I've got this wonderful dark blue. Now you can see it up here and you can see it here. And that was a very small amount that I had left over of a colourway called Lys Marine, which is also Solje. And that was from my Lune shawl by Natasha Hornby, and that was actually sent to me by Jackie of Caddy Jack's Knits. So she had completed her Lune and she sent me her leftover yarn, and I had to purchase a little bit extra of one of the colours, but the Lys Marine, so it's now been in Jackie's shawl, in my shawl, and now it's in my Vair. So, and I think I still have like a really ridiculously small amount, so I'll need to find something else to pop that in. And then this lighter colour here, well, this is Sweet Pea, and this is a Holst Super Soft yarn. They are going to get mentioned quite a lot in this episode because I have knitted fairly extensively in their yarns. And you can see it up here as well. So it really does create a stronger contrast. It's the strongest contrast that I have. And that colour was in my half and half wrap, and that by Pearl Soho, which is a wrap that I wear an awful lot, particularly in the winter time, because it is so incredibly warming. I do find these woolier wools to be really warming in the winter time, and so they really are becoming my absolute go-to, and I suppose that's going to be demonstrated throughout this whole episode. The other thing I wanted to say too was, I think when I had podcast before, I had knit the body and I had done the steeks and I had picked up and was working on this first sleeve. And the sleeve is created by short rows to create a sleeve cap before you move into the rounds. And I think actually, I'm not sure if that's the first time that I've done that, but certainly I think it's a beautiful way to create a really lovely line within the garment. I'll move forward just so that you can see a little bit better. But I really am impressed with this beautiful design and the way that it all comes together in the end. I should also say about the steeking, if you are nervous about the steeking, and you know, I can understand that. I am also nervous about steeking. I think I've mentioned here before my reticence to steek, because one of the things I love about knitting is about the reusability of our resources, so that we can take things back and I've got an example of that a little bit later on as well. But of course, once we've steeked our knitting, once we've cut it, there's no way of taking it back. So that's a source of anxiety, certainly. And then there's also this horrible fear that we've done all this wonderful work and we're really pleased with it, and then we cut it and then it all unravels and falls to pieces. And of course that doesn't happen because you're using, well, particularly when you're using a sticky yarn like I was using, but also because I followed some wonderful instructions by Gudrun Johnson, who's created a little YouTube tutorial on reinforcing your steeks. So I reinforced my steeks before I moved on, and that really gave me some confidence, I think, to keep going. So it is a beautiful pattern. I'm so pleased with it. I think it's a real showstopper, actually. It's no wonder that it's, you know, on the cover of the book. In fact, I'll show you the back of the book as well, because you can see that actually there's two versions of it there. In different colours, but it's such a beautiful pattern. And Gudrun's also got a couple of different options. So if you didn't like, for example, the big turtleneck, then she's got a crew neck version, which you can see here in the lighter colourway. And if you didn't like all of these colours moving through the body, then there's also a version for that too, which you can see here. So you just one colour through the lace, and then your colour work. There's also, you'll also see too that if you didn't want to do the big balloon sleeves like I have, you can do tapering sleeves instead. So there are a number of options, and that's all listed in the book. The book is fascinating. It's just, and so full of beautiful patterns. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some knitting plans that I have, and I'm going to be referring once again back to this because I definitely see more from Shetland Trader 3 in my 2022. So yes, highly recommend the book. If you can get your hands on it, then I would suggest that you do. And yes, I'm really pleased with it. It's a beautiful piece, and it's very cozy, and I think it looks beautiful. As I mentioned at my knit night the other week there, that it really meets all of my 1970s vintage dreams. So yes, there you go. That's the Vair, Vair, and that's by Gudrun Johnson. So that's my first finished object. I think that's everything I wanted to say about it particularly, but there we go. The second finished object, and this isn't one that you've seen at all because I cast it on, gosh, when would it have been? It's been about 9 days of knitting, I think, to get this. So I cast it on after the new year, so that's why you've not seen it. But this is the Fairy Bouquet, and it is by Joanna Ang, and I have knitted it in Holst Super Soft in the colour Brandy, which I have a cone of here. I love this yarn, look at that. Isn't it beautiful? See the kind of heathered tones through it? There's almost like gold through it. So that's Brandy, and I held it with a strand of this. And this is Holst Titicaca, which is 100% lace weight alpaca. And I had seen, I think I actually saw it on Holst that they were saying about using this instead of mohair. Now, obviously, it does not have the halo that mohair has. There are, I don't know, if I hold it up, maybe you'll see. There are like some longer fibres, and it is a slightly fluffy yarn, but it certainly is not as fluffy as mohair. So as much as I love mohair, and I do love mohair, and again there'll be more of that later, I was quite intrigued at what this would be like, and so I really wanted to give it a go. So I bought this colour specifically to go with the cone of yarn that I already had. So I'll just show you the two together actually. So you'll see that the whole Super Soft is perhaps slightly darker in shade, and the Titicaca is slightly brighter. The Super Soft is called Brandy and the Titicaca is called Fiesta. So it's a brandy fiesta. And this is how it looks like when it's knitted up together. So I'll just try and show you the body. So there we go. That's the two yarns knitted up together. This has been washed and blocked. And oh my goodness, well, I'll tell you a little bit about that shortly, but let me begin with this wonderful pattern. So I had seen images of the Fairy Bouquet on Instagram, I think when test knitters were first being called for. And I've had my eye on it since then, and so when it was released as a pattern, I bought it for myself because I do think it's exceptionally beautiful. It actually reminds me a little bit of the ranunculus. It is knitted at a similar gauge, maybe a slightly tighter gauge, but there's something about this kind of textured and, you know, a little bit of lace work in the yoke, but unlike the ranunculus, of course, this has different sizes. So that's always been one of my issues with the ranunculus, is that it's not size inclusive. This is more size inclusive. So because it just by dint of the fact that it has more sizes. So yes, I knitted the third size, although now I'm saying that I can't quite remember. But the one that gave me, or maybe it was the fourth size, the one that gave me about 5 or 6 inches of positive ease. So it's not clinging to my body, it's just a nice drape. Actually, I'll pop some photographs up so you can see me wearing it, so you can see how it sits on my body. So I'll talk a little bit about these, about this yoke. So you'll see that there's these little sort of butterflies, and those are created with such a fun stitch that I really enjoy doing. And then underneath that, we've got these fairy bouquets that are created with a little knot in the centre and a little bit of lace, and then a repetition of the butterfly stitch, and then some twisted rib. Now, if you do not like twisted rib, this is not the pattern for you. Because it has a lot of twisted rib. So twisted rib, it's not full twisted rib because the purls are not twisted. You are only knitting through the back loop and we're not purling through the back loop. So that does speed things up significantly. I always find when you have to purl through the back loop as well, that's always a really kind of awkward. Well, certainly I find it awkward. I throw my yarn, so that's so I'm working with the right needle, so that's a particularly awkward stitch to try and complete. But knitting through the back loop is not too much different from knitting through the front loop, so that's fine. But there's quite a lot of it because you have it in the collar, you have it in the cuffs, you have it in the hem, you have it in the yoke, and then you have it down these fabulous panels that sit down the sleeves, which I will speak about in a second. So there is a lot of twisted rib, but the way that Joanna has placed the rib in the garment, in the design, is just so clever and it works so beautifully. I'll just show you some examples. So you'll see here we've got the twisted rib for the as a detail in the yoke, and then we've got here the raglan increases, and the raglan increases connect beautifully to one of the columns of the twisted rib. And then when we move into the sleeve, you'll see the same again. So we've got the detail on the yoke that goes right round the arm, and then here it moves into our cable stitches which run down the sides, and then this twisted rib panel that runs right the way down as a cable with these smocking stitches here to create these beautiful butterfly motifs, and there's 6 of them all together. But then not only that, because when you get to the cuff, Joanna's given instructions for doing right and left double decreases for rib, and so you create these really neat decreases which then move into the cuff. So you'll see the way in which the cable meets up with the column of twisted rib. It is just so well thought through. It is a pleasure, and every time you notice one of these little details that Joanna has put so much thought and care into, it is just such a thrill actually, and just really delightful. I'm so pleased with this pattern. It was actually the sleeves, these amazing, people talk about being on Sleeve Island. Well, this is a sleeve island that you want to, this is like a holiday island. This is a sleeve island you want to hang out on for quite a while, because you are just creating such beauty. Aren't they just lovely? And it's really the way in which you create the smocking stitches is detailed in the pattern itself, but she's also got links to lots of different video tutorials for each one of these techniques as well. So if you're a visual learner, then it's really good to have these kind of YouTube tutorials, isn't it? So we can hop through and actually see these particular stitches being done. So I really appreciated that as well. One thing I would say is that I used a German twisted cast on for the neck, and I'm really glad I did, because the neck, even with a German twisted cast on, is it's not too tight by any stretch of the imagination, because I can get it over my head. It is, and it sits quite high, and again I'll show you a photograph so you'll be able to see. It sits quite high up, and I know that's a style that some people really enjoy and really like. But I would just say that choose a stretchy cast on for your neck, because it is a high neckline. So if you are if you are concerned about that, then just make sure that you are using a stretchy cast on, like the German twisted cast on, which is just a little variation on the long tail twist, on the long tail cast on. There's lots of tutorials on YouTube for that, and maybe even going up a needle size might help a little bit as well, just to create a little bit more give in it, again, if that's something that you're concerned about. But like I said, it absolutely fits over my head. And in fact it sits beautifully. I'm really pleased with it, and like I said, these panel of smocking stitches that sits down the length of the sleeve are just absolutely beautiful, and I so enjoyed it. I was really craving some red, what you can't see about this jumper, about this finished piece, is that when I did my steek, I reinforced, as I said, I reinforced the steeks before I cut them, and I reinforced it using this shade of red, and I wanted to do that so that it was really distinct from the rest of the garment, so I could see very clearly what was a reinforcement and what was the fabric. So after I did that, I was like, oh, I wanna work more with that colour. I could feel it in my whole being, and I wanted to just really drench myself and feel this colour flowing through my hands and through my needles, and so I knew that I needed to cast on something this colour. And also because this colour is very enlivening, it's a real energising shade, and my energy has been very low. So right before Christmas I came down with a horrible cold, tested negative for COVID, thank heavens, but it has been a really horrid cold, and it's taken me a long time to shift. You might still hear it a little bit in my voice, I'm slightly husky. but you can hear me, so that is an improvement. So yes, and that's really let my it's given me the experience of having very low energy. And so when that happens, I think we need to look at, what brings us back into life, what gives us a sense of vitality, and what reignites that vital spark. And well, knitting is my practice. It is what I turn to. It is how my life force is expressed into the tangible and into the material realm. And so that's why I decided that it was actually really important for my own sense of well-being and the ways in which my own soul chooses to show up in the world, to knit something in bright red. So so there we go, red for January. And I mentioned this on Instagram, that I think red quite often a red jumper gets connected to Christmas time, but I wear this colour all year round, so that's that's fine for me. But I think there is something about having this sort of bright and vivid colour. It's actually connected as well to the first chakra, the root chakra, the chakra which gives us a sense of safety and security and survival instinct. So it is this very sort of bright and vital colour, and I think there's just something really lovely about having this shot of bright colour during what is certainly today is a very dull January day. So during these winter periods, I think there's a real desire for me, certainly, to work with these strong, bright, vivid colours. I know that's not the same for everybody. Everybody's different, and I think that's the wonderful thing. Each of us gets to move towards the colour that most delights us at any particular time, particularly as knitters and crocheters and weavers and crafters of all kinds of fibre arts. We get to work with this material, these fibres, drenched in hues and shades that are most appealing to us in any particular moment. And this was certainly the one that was appealing to me. Oh, and I need to say too that when I cast this on, I was also imagining it being worn with this. And you have seen this lots of times before. In fact, I think you have seen probably these on many podcasts lots of times in the last few months, but it is my Shellography by Stephen West. You might remember that I added some fringing to mine at the end there. This has the same yarn in it. Now, I bought this as a cake of yarn from Holst Super Soft, and I buy my Holst direct from Holst in Denmark, and it is shipped over here. In the UK, you have to make sure that your order comes to under 2 kilos, because if it goes over 2 kilos, then it seems to go missing, and then there's issues, and so they now restrict your order to under 2 kilos to make sure that those issues don't present. So yes, I had ordered, I had a couple of cakes of this brandy colour, which I loved so much, which is why I ended up buying the cone. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be fabulous to knit some jumpers that match some of the colours in these beautiful bright Stephen West shawls that I have, which, so I've used these two colours here, which is straw and scarab. I've used those colours in my Slipstravaganza as well, that I knitted last year. But I have bought a cone of the scarab, and I've bought a cone of, oh my goodness, I've completely forgotten the name of it, but it's actually a discontinued colour, which is why I panicked and bought the cone. And I've also bought a cone of this brandy as well. So I have a number of, is it violet? Is that what it was called? I can't remember what that colour is called. Anyway, that was what my thinking was that I would knit myself some pieces that would match up with some of these beautiful, vivid and multicoloured shawls. So I'm really loving these two together. I wore them yesterday with some bright red lipstick, and it was absolutely the tonic that my spirit and my soul were needing. So there we go. That's the Fairy Bouquet sweater, and it's by Joanna Ang, and it's a lot of fun and a lot of joy was had knitting this particular one. So highly recommended, particularly if you do enjoy the ranunculus. This almost feels like ranunculus's big sister because you'll enjoy doing the textured yoke. You'll really love doing this beautiful stitch down here. I did not use one last thing. I did not use a cable needle for my cables or for the smocking stitches, and that's because there is a tutorial. I wouldn't have used a cable needle for the cables anyway, but there is a tutorial for using for those stitches, so that you don't have to do that, and it speeds things up significantly. But it's a lot of fun, and yes, I'm very glad that I cast on, and it's my first cast on, cast off finish in 2022. Okay, oh my goodness, so that's my two finished objects. So I have some works in progress, so I will show you this first because these are very cute. So the shellography, you might have seen people mentioning that they had quite a lot of yarn left over after completing their shellographies, and I was certainly no different in that respect. I had a lot of yarn left over too. So I had a whole cake left of the brandy. Can you tell? I'm just knitting everything in this colour just now. So using the leftover cake that I didn't use for the shellography, and this, which is John Arbon's Exmoor sock in Mizzle. So you can see the two of them together there. So it's like a silvery grey shade, very light. I think it is a natural undyed shade from that range. I started, well, I don't think technically, do we call these hose half finished objects? Yeah, I think we've had that conversation before. But I have finished, apart from the thumb, this gorgeous mitten. Now these are the Deer and Matrjoschka mittens by Eleanor Mortensen. And the pattern came out first for the deer mittens, and this Matrjoschka mitten design has been included as an extra now. So you'll receive, when you buy the pattern, you receive the charts for both. And I saw it on Tracy from the Grocery Girls. She popped an image of this design on her Instagram stories. And I thought they were just the most cutest, beautiful things I'd seen in a long time. And I just really thought that doing the colour work would be a lot of fun. I really like the cuffs, which you can see as these sort of like twisted stitch, kind of like a faux cable rib. And then these will not look like this when I'm finished, because when you are finished, you actually embroider over the top. And I'll put an image in just now so that you can see what they will hopefully look like when I am finished. Now, I will preface that by saying I am not an embroiderer. I can't even remember. My friend asked me the other day there, when was the last time I embroidered, and I can't actually remember. So hopefully they will look something like the image, fingers crossed. But basically the chart just gets you to knit in the two colours, and then it shows you where you will basically duplicate stitch over the top of some of these stitches here in order to create, for example, the little face. But look at her little mouth. Isn't she gorgeous? And actually I thought, oh my goodness, these look absolutely huge. which is, I also thought that about my next project, but actually once I put them on my hands, they are not too huge. My middle finger comes to here. So, and there's my thumb. When I showed them to my husband, he went, "Oh, they don't have a thumb." I was like, "Yes, darling, that's going to come later." They don't stay like this. So that will be sorted. And actually the thumb's really cute too, because it has another little Matrjoschka on there too. So there we go. That's, I'll move the thumb out the way. But that's Matrjoschka mittens, and I just think they're so cute. So I have to knit another one, obviously. and I need to knit the thumb. So, and then I'm going to do the embroidery. So I'm hopeful that I will be able to get another one of these out. Particularly, I mean, in December here, it's not terribly cold. We are actually quite a temperate country. We have the Gulf Stream, we get a lot of rain, we get the storms coming out over the Atlantic. But in January, February, and actually occasionally March as well, I would say it's when we get some of our coldest weather. And so I would like to have a really cosy pair of mittens. Now, I am slightly concerned because what I didn't mention was when I washed and blocked, and I will put in an image of the water of the first wash of this jumper, it bled a lot. Yeah, a lot of dye and spinning oil came out. And that's to be expected because Holst Super Soft does still have its spinning oil in it. So just like mentioned with this, it does have a drier handle. It does almost seem a little bit thin and stringy, but when you wash it, the fibres really puff up. But in doing so, in the washing process, they're obviously releasing some of the extra dye and the spinning oil itself. So it did change the colour of the water into something which looked like watered down ketchup. And when I shared that with my knit night, they were saying, just as well you didn't do colour work. So that will be an experiment. What my process for washing the jumper was that I put some lukewarm water into a basin. I added some, I was going to say wool wash, but actually I use a very mild shampoo. So I put some very mild shampoo into it, which, you know, is a much cheaper option. So if you are money conscious, then that might be a good option for you too. But added in some shampoo and I swirled it all around, and then I added in the jumper, and at that point, like I said, I kind of scrunched it down a bit and moved it around very gently, just sort of getting the water to circulate through it, and it started to release a lot of this extra dye and spinning oil. Once I'd done that quite a few times, I then took the garment out of the water and I put some more lukewarm water in. I didn't add any more of the mild detergent in at all. So I then filled it back up with the lukewarm water, put the garment back in, moved the water through the garment, and again it a lot more was being released. So I emptied out that water again and redid the process until I ended up with the fourth basin of water, and with that one the water was clear. So that's the water that I then left the garment to soak in for the next 20 minutes. After that, I squeezed as much water as I possibly could without wringing it, still being gentle with the garment, but trying to remove as much water as I could. And then I laid it down flat on top of a towel, and then I put a second towel over the top, and then I rolled it all up like a big sausage and stomped all the way along it. Kind of like that scene in I Love Lucy, you know, when she's stomping on the grapes. That's the one I always think of. So stomping along the edge of it. My mum and I also had a very funny experience of stomping on our knitting, which was very funny. But so yes, I stomp along the edge, along the length of it, and then unroll it, and then I put it out to dry. Now, you can put it flat out to dry. I tend to find that what works best for me is that I have a very long metal pole, and I put the pole all the way through the sleeve from the beginning, all the way through the body, all the way out the other sleeve, so it's like this, and then I balance that in the sunshine somewhere, if you can find it in January in Scotland. Or closer to a radiator, which is a slightly better bet at this time of year, and let it dry fully. And that's what I did with that. So with this, I will do a similar kind of process, in that I will do an initial wash and then empty out the water and do it again until I get some clear water. And when I have the clear water, that's what I'll leave the mittens to soak in, before I then take them out, squeeze out as much water as I can, and then put them to dry. So these are my Matrjoschka mittens by Eleanor Mortensen. They are super cute. And I will also say too that maybe, well, we're about up to there, but maybe about half the mitten I was using DPNs. And then I switched and I did magic loop for the rest. I have long said that I don't like magic loop, and I was thinking about that earlier. Well, maybe must have been the other week there, and I think this is a really helpful thing to ask ourselves every now and again, particularly when we have these kind of very sort of declarative sentences that we repeat, like "I don't like magic loop." Or "I don't like knitting socks." These are some of the things I tell myself, and then following that up, asking the question, well, is that really true? And so I thought, well, when was the last time I even tried magic loop at all? And I couldn't remember. So I decided that I was going to give it a go, and I was running the risk by the fact that I had knitted using my DPNs up to here, and actually there might then be a difference from the lower half to the top half, but as you can see, there's no real difference at all. And it was a little bit easier until I got to the very top, and then I would say it got a little bit fiddly, and I got in a little bit of a tangle, but I managed to sort myself out, and I will knit the second pair just on my long circular needles. So there we go. Matrjoschka mittens in Holst Super Soft and John Arbon's Exmoor sock. And following on from that exploration in magic loop, I thought, well, my husband has been asking me for a pair of cozy house socks. Like I said, it is getting a bit colder now, and he has been asking for these socks for about the last 6 weeks or so. And having finished the Fairy Bouquet and the Vair beforehand, and with a few big projects about to come up, which I'm going to share with you also, I figured I really better knit these socks, because then I will have guilt-free cast-ons from then on out. So the other day there, I cast on a pair of, they're called the snowshoe socks, I think. Yes, snowshoe socks. And these are by Emily Foden from her Knits About Winter book. Now, you might be seeing a pattern here. I am actually trying to knit more from my books, because I have beautiful books. You might have beautiful books too, or you might be able to get beautiful books from your library, or from charity shops. They sometimes quite have interesting books too. But yes, I'm trying to knit more from some of these beautiful books that I own. I was thinking about the process that authors move through of knitting books as they curate collections of their own designs, and the amount of effort and time and energy that's put into creating a collection, and then presenting it in collaboration with publishers to make these really beautiful products. And so I want to celebrate that a little bit more, and really enjoy them for myself. So When Frank asked for a pair of house socks, I had a feeling that I had a pattern in Knits About Winter for those, and I did. So these are the snowshoe socks. You'll see that they are, well, these ones are 2 strands of fingering held together. And I did not do that. I've used DK weight, and this is a sock. Funny. So when I was knitting it, I was thinking, particularly last night. So last night I had knitted down the leg of the sock, I had knitted the heel flap, I had picked up the stitches for the gusset, and I was now, I think I'd even like gotten up to about here. And I asked Frank to put them on because I just thought they looked absolutely massive. And he put them on and they fit perfectly. So, so it turns out he's just got really big feet, because I put them on and they were absolutely massive on my feet. So they are a 3x1 rib, as you can see there, and a 1x1 rib cuff. I have not woven my ends in yet. These are knitted up in Drops Charisma, which is not a sock yarn, I would say, because they are 100% wool. So there's no nylon in these at all. There's nothing to strengthen them, but that's fine because these are house socks. He will not be wearing these inside his boots, and so these are more like glorified slippers, really. These are the leftovers from the Letho Wee that I knitted for him at the end of last year, which I think you can maybe see in episode 22. The Letho Wee is a cardigan design by Natasha Hornby, who is Moonstruck Knits. She first of all came out with the Letho, which is more of a feminine shape, with more like dolman sleeves. And then she brought out the Letho Wee, which is a more masculine shape. And so I knitted the Letho for myself, I think in 2020. Yes, 2020. And I knitted the Letho Wee for Frank at the end of 2021. And so I am using up the leftovers of the Letho Wee. The other sock will not look the same. I am just doing random stripes as and when. Because I've only got one more ball of this, but I do have some of these still left. So altogether, I've got a little bit of that left. So altogether, I've got enough to do a second sock. I am spit splicing as I go. So that means that I don't have any ends to weave in other than the one at the top and the one at the bottom. Everything else is, you can see, because of the spit splicing, and I spit splice on this as well, so which you are recommended to do actually, because in fact I'll see if I can show you. Maybe just you can start to see a little bit there, the variation, the varying colour, moving from one colour into the other, and that's because with it being lace and stripes in lace, you don't want to have like a lot of ends hanging out there, so instead spit splicing your yarn. And if you don't know what I mean by spit splicing, basically you have your 2 pieces of yarn that you're wanting to join. I will trim them slightly to create an even edge, and then I will strip out maybe a couple of strands. If it's a multiple strand, like a 4-ply for example, I'll take 2 plies out of each side, and then I will bring them together, wrap them round each other, so, and then lick my other hand, and rub them together. And what the rubbing together, it only works with animal fibres, I should say too, and it works better. I'm not sure if it works with superwash yarn, but it certainly will work with non-superwash yarn. But when you rub together, the moisture and the heat will felt the fibre and create and fuse your fibres together to create a coherent strand of yarn, which you can then continue to knit with. It means that you don't have your ends to weave in afterwards, and so particularly when it's something like lace, you don't then have to worry about, you know, your ends hanging out through the holes of your lace knitting. So or, you know, you can just, means that you don't have anything to do afterwards other than your two ends at the beginning and the end. So like I said, the other sock will not look like this one. I will you know, just randomly choose my yarn to stripe in, but they're just a fun pair of house socks, and it was just a fun thing to knit for him, and hopefully will keep his feet cosy. So again, another half finished object. I should say too, actually, I didn't mention that there, but my bags, which are housing my Matrjoschka mittens and my snowshoe socks, are both from the cocoon tree. I'll just show you there you go, the cocoon tree. And they are beautiful bags. I'll share the link for them in the, here we go, in the show notes to the Etsy shop, so that you can go and check out. I think there's some new designs coming in, so you might want to go and check them out and maybe treat yourself a post-festive seasonal treat. So let me see, what am I casting on next? Well, I have plans. I have lots of plans. Okay, so first plan. This is something I've had my eye on for a little while, and I saw Dinah on the Knitting Place knitting one of these, and her knitting is just, I mean, both her and Pam are just such a delight, and their knitting is beautiful, and they choose such beautiful designs to work on, and I really enjoy their podcast, and they do lives on Instagram quite frequently as well, so it's always fun to see what they're unboxing in the shop, and what they're casting on next, and how their current projects are going. So Dinah is currently working on a spot sweater by Anne Wenzel. So I'll pop an image up of that just now so you can see what that looks like. I had thought about this for a little while, but it was only after watching their podcast and seeing Dinah's progress that I started to think about what I had in my stash that would actually work. And once I figured out what would work in my stash, it's now all I can think about. So I have more Drops Charisma, which I bought actually at the same time as the Charisma that I bought for the Letho Wee, which suggests to me that it was on a sale. And it's already pretty inexpensive. Again, it's 100% yarn. 100% yarn? Of course it's 100% yarn. It's 100% wool. And it's this wonderful sort of dark grape colour. It's a bit darker than this colour that I'm wearing just now. So it's kind of this dark grape. I just really enjoy this colour. So it's a DK weight, so this will be my background colour. And then I think the pattern calls you to use 2 strands of mohair. Now, I do have lots of different shades of mohair, but what I also have are quite a few different shades of this. And it's alpaca silk, brushed alpaca silk, and again it's from Drops. Now, I love this yarn. I've used it in quite a few different projects. You might remember it in my Painting Bricks by Stephen West. What else have I used it in? Can't think now. But I've used it in quite a few different projects. So I have some leftover balls from some of those projects, some that I've picked up on a D-stash, and I also picked up a sweater quantity during one of the Drops alpaca sales. So I have a variety of different colours. So what I want to do is use the brushed alpaca silk as my contrast colours to the Charisma in this dark grape colour. So this is what my colour is going to move through, just to show you. Can you see that? So we're moving from this beautiful kind of like silvery beige shade to this pink sand, to this bright cerise, and then down into this darker magenta. So just show you what that looks like with that. So we're moving from something very high contrast to a lower contrast, which I'm quite excited about exploring more about. So that's the Anne Wenzel design, the spot sweater. I'll tell you who else who has a really lovely version of that is Millie from Tribe Yarns. You should go check out hers as well. She used scrap yarn, which is exceptionally beautiful too. So yes, that's one of my knitting plans. The next knitting plan that I have uses some of this yarn, and this yarn is Garthenor number 1, which is a Shetland lace, and I bought it undyed in a shade I think was called Pebble, which was kind of like, again, actually not dissimilar from that silvery beige, and after I had sat with it for a little while, I thought, you know, I don't wear that colour. I very rarely, I know this is a shock for everybody, I very rarely wear neutrals. they're not my knitting happy place, which is funny because I'll explain why shortly. But I decided I was going to dye it. So me and my friend Jen dyed up this beautiful shade of mossy green. So I have 4 skeins of this that we dyed. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Really, really lovely. I'm so pleased with how it turned out. That's a more accurate colour, I think. I'm beginning to lose the light, so I'm relying more and more on artificial light as we go along here. So I'm hoping to show you all the things and you'll be able to see them properly. Actually, it's not that dissimilar from my futon behind me. So, what do I want to use this for? Well, I want to use this for another pattern from Gudrun's Shetland Trader, and I want to use it to knit this. This is the Maywick, and it is an all-over lace top. She's actually got a really lovely photograph at the very beginning of the book of her mum wearing the same design. So it's the razor lace, the same that's present in here. So it's going to be created with a series of lace rounds and purl rounds, but it's going to be all over. So, and yes, there are a lot of colours in that design, but I've decided that I just want to knit it in one, well, I thought I wanted to do it in just one colour. And then I had the thought, well, I'm always interested about, you know, what happens when we add in some interesting textures. You know, what happens if we add in some, for example, mohair. And I remembered that I had some wonderful mohair from Ching Fibre, which is one of my favourite places to get kid silk mohair from because of the really unusual colour combinations that they do. And this colour was called Punjabi, and it was like a dark green, you can see. Just got these kind of pops of bright colours and neons, and I really, really love this. I used it for my striped S-Jan, and I held that along with a single ply lace weight merino from Cowgirl Blues. It's a South African yarn company. So that was that went into my striped S-Jan. So I've got a very small amount of that left. So I thought, well, I don't really have enough of this to do like a random, or not a random stripe, but stripes added into this for the Maywick. So I had a little look around. It's not a very easy colour to find anymore. Ching Fibre don't stock it anymore, so and they're not advertising that they're offering it, so I couldn't get in touch and ask them to dye it up specially. Well, maybe I could have, but I didn't. So instead I got in touch with Loop London, because Loop had a single skein of Punjabi listed. So I bought the skein, and then they got back in touch with me a couple of days later to say they've searched high and low and they cannot find the skein anywhere, and they gave me an alternative to see whether I would be happy to take that instead. And so this colour is called Palenque, Palenquue. And this is, my goodness. So as soon as they showed me the skeins, I went, yes, of course, that's that will be absolutely fine. Because isn't it absolutely glorious? These pale peaches, these bright pops again of the yellow and the magenta, a little bit of red, dark purple, all against this kind of main colour of this lovely mossy green, which was what I was wanting to really pair it with my own hand dyed. So this is now going to be the Malik. So I'm going to use the mohair as a contrasting stripe to the rest of the jumper, the top, which will be in the Garthanor lace that I've dyed in the mossy green. So there you go, that's another knitting plan. I should say this is not a make 9, and that's not because I don't like make 9s. I love make 9s. A make 9, if you're not familiar, is when people choose like 9 projects that they want to make over the course of a year. I'm a prolific knitter. I get through 9 before we'd even get halfway through the year. So I won't be doing a make 9. These are just my my current knitting plans, which may change. So the other thing I wanted to do, I don't know if you've seen on Caddy Jack's Knits, Jackie's been knitting these fabulous hoods called the Nomad Hood. And it's a pattern by Suzanne Muller. And moving along with my obsession with all things super soft brandy, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have a red hood, like Little Red Riding Hood? So I'm going to knit myself one of those. That pattern's DK, so I'm just going to hold 2 strands of the super soft together, but I think that'll be a slightly quicker project, so that's definitely going to be another accessory that I want to knit, and I think it will go well with my wee mittens as well. So yes, I'll be knitting those. I'll be knitting that as well. And then the other plan that I have, I know, lots of plans, but then 'tis the season for plans, is it not? So the other thing, and I've dropped this down here, you might remember that I picked up these incredibly beautiful skeins. That's better. I'm getting a better colour the further back I am, I think. And this is Moon Age Daydreamer, which is a beautiful colourway that was dyed especially for Perth Festival of Yarn by the dyer Blue Dot Yarns. So again, I'll put a link in my show notes so you can go and check out her Etsy shop. But I'll just open this up so that you can see it, because again, it's just, isn't that just absolutely beautiful? Perth Festival of Yarn has announced its dates. I think it's going to be this year the 10th and 12th of September. Yes, 10th and 11th, sorry, of September. If that's wrong, I will correct myself on the screen. And they are now open for vendor applications as well. So I'm really excited about going to that this year. So I'll be buying my ticket as soon as that's available. But yes, this was a special colourway, and you might remember that I gave away a skein of this in the sock yarn base as a prize last September. and I had bought myself 2 skeins of these in the Suri alpaca base. There's 300 meters to 100 grams here. And I didn't have a plan for them, I didn't have a project for them, I just knew that I loved them. Well, on Instagram, a wee while back now, but I saw it again recently, because I think it's now finished, the wonderful women behind Sonder Yarn Co. have knitted a version of Pressed Flowers by Amy Christoffers. And again, I'll pop an image up of that so you can see it. Now, I have seen quite a few versions of this, but I think theirs was the first version that I ever saw where their contrast colour was a Suri alpaca. And when I looked at the amounts that were required, I realised that 2 skeins were perfect. So I will have to buy a DK weight. I don't think I've got anything in my stash that will do, unless I use one of my cones and double it up. That's a possibility. So I might do that. And I'll be able to explore that as well, that pattern too, because it's such a beautiful pattern. Every time I see it, I think, oh, it just looks so lovely. But I think the adding in of the texture, again, like adding in the mohair with the Maywick, you know, I'm really intrigued to see, you know, what impact that has on the colour work. So that's another knitting plan. Now, I have some other knitting to do, and this is because rather than do like a lot of gift knitting, I tend to not do that, and instead I knit for people throughout the year. So, for example, knitting these house socks for my husband. For Christmas this year, I gave the children a voucher, a handwritten voucher, that says each of them gets to co-create a jumper with me and I will knit it for them. So we've had our conversations, we've gone through designs, we've gone through colours, we've gone through yarn options, and each of them has chosen a particular jumper that they would like to be knitted. So my eldest son, who is 22, he has decided that he would like to have the single malt sweater by Maxim Sear, who is Max the Knitter. This is a jumper, it's a beautiful jumper, and it's knitted in Aran weight, but my son Seb has asked that it would be a lighter weight jumper that would fit more comfortably under some of his jackets. So I've decided that I will knit a version for him using Holst Super Soft with Titicaca. So it'll be a similar weight as this. Perhaps even, I mean, when it did wash, it did. You can see my hand, but it is still pretty opaque. So I'll need to experiment with gauge, make sure I get a nice fabric, a nice weight of fabric from that. And it will also require some knitting maths, because I'm going to have to figure out how to make sure that it fits him. But yes, he chose the colour in the Super Soft Pebble with the Titicaca shade Eucalyptus. So it's kind of like a very, very light grey bordering on sagey green. My daughter Aurora, who is 23, chose a cardigan by Thea Coleman called the Peated Whiskey. Now, they chose this completely independently, but they have gone along a certain theme, which is fascinating when you see that presenting in siblings. So we've got the single malt sweater and we've got the Peated Whiskey cardigan by Thea Coleman, which is this highly cabled cardigan. And again, it's in an Aran weight yarn. I have ordered some Holst Super Soft, a cone, in order to be able to hold it double. And again, I might need to do a little bit of knitting maths to make sure that we get a size that fits her. And she chose the shade Slate Grey. And my youngest, who is 20, Alexander, he has chosen he chose a jumper that wasn't named after Scottish alcohol, but he did choose one called Albion, and it's by Michelle Wang, and it's in Brooklyn Tweed's Men Volume 2, I think. And it is again an Aran weight jumper, a worsted weight jumper. So I'll be holding Super Soft double again for that, and he chose the shade black. So my children have chosen light grey, dark grey and black as their preferred colours. They all have to rebel somehow, don't they? So I mean, I suppose in if they're going to rebel in some kind of way, then this is probably one of the better. But so I'm going to have these large knitting projects on the needles over probably the next 3 to 4 months, I would expect, and they will be in these neutral colours. I'm going to start off with the light grey, move to the dark grey, and then to the black, with the hope that by the time I get to the black, I will have more natural daylight, because I loathe knitting black when I have no natural light. And you might remember that from my black ranunculus that I sped knit in October, I think it maybe was, before we lost the light too much. So that'll be the order that I knit those in. So those will be hopping on my needles soon. So I have a large order of Holst Super Soft cones coming to me from Denmark. In fact, I received notification this morning that they were on their way, and so once they arrive I will cast on the single moult. Well, I'll do swatches and figure out numbers, and might call in my mathematician helpers to make sure that I've got all of that correct. But yes, those are the knitting plans. They are extensive, so there we go. I wanted to share with you, one more thing actually, and this is, I suppose this does sit under knitting plans, but I just did want to share. This is my Astrid by Junko Okamoto. I knitted it last year. I absolutely love it. It is overall colour work. I have knitted it in Jameson and Smith. This was a cone that I picked up that they had on sale. The colour work is Rauma Phenol PT2, and I chose these kind of really quite bright shades, and in fact I think that dark purple there is actually Holst Super Soft as well. I think that's a leftover from my Slipstravaganza, and actually this bright green here is Preseli by Garthenor in the colour Tilia. Look at me go! So for the bright pink and the green and this sort of peachy shade here, they are all Rauma. This is delightful. It's stranded knitting. I'll show you the inside. So it's super warm and cozy. And when I finished it with these fabulous cabled sleeves, when I finished it, it actually finished here pretty much, with these very wide sleeves. And every time I walked through the door, they would catch on the door handle. After this happened several times, I was like, I can't. So I ripped back the little bit of cast off. I improvised some decreases and I knitted a longer cuff, and that now brings the sleeve to my wrist, and it no longer impedes my progress into rooms, which is excellent. However, it also has this rolled hem. Now the rolled hem doesn't stop me from going into rooms, so that's one good thing. But I've discovered I really don't like the edging of this, and I don't like the shape it then creates for the overall garment, which then becomes very A-line. If you see, I mean, as with Junko Okamoto's patterns, there's one size. There's no variation. So this is the size that you knit. So it is a very large, on me, it's a very oversized garment. But it is this A-line shape, and I don't like it. So I am going to rip back this rolled hem and I'm doing this on screen right now so that I actually do what I want to do, because I've been thinking about it while I've been knitting these socks and the mittens and things, that actually what I really want to do is I really want to fix this jumper so that it's wearable for me. So I'm going to continue on frogging, and I'm going to take it all the way back to just above this garter ridge here, and then I'm going to knit it back up as a straightforward 1x1 rib. And I'm going to do it on slightly tighter needles, on smaller needles, to create a tighter gauge, with the hope that it brings it in slightly, and also that it stops turning up as this rolled hen. So that's the other knitting plan, is to get that fixed, because then I think once I've done that, it will be the finished article. I would really like to knit some more Junko Okamoto patterns. I've got yarn for a plum sweater, and I've had that for a little while, so I'd like to cast that on at some point. And there was the Hannah. I've also got yarn for the Hannah as well, which I think would be a really fun knit too. So more Junko in my future, but yes, don't be afraid about going back and fixing your knitting. Hey, I think it's a really important thing to do, because it then creates a more wearable garment, and really we invest so much time and energy and effort and skill and money into these pieces. Why wouldn't we go back and fix them if they are not currently being worn because there's something a little bit wrong with them, whether it's the sleeves are too large, or the shape needs to be modified in some way by finishing off and edging. These are small things to do in the grand scheme of knitting a whole garment. So yes, that's what I intend to do. So I don't have any acquisitions other than that lovely skein of mohair that I showed you that came from Loop, but I do have this lovely jumper that my mum knitted for me, and this was a gift for Christmas time, and I just absolutely, well, it's such a, when you're a knitter, you really, really respect the knitting that goes in. I've got it the wrong way around, there we go. That goes into a gift. So I'm hugely, hugely grateful to my lovely mum for knitting this beautiful jumper for me. It's knitted using Cowgirl Blues. I think it's merino with a mohair held with parts of it, and the colourway is True Colours. Isn't it beautiful? And this is a heavily modified ranunculus. My mum has knitted I don't know how many of these, and she has modified the majority of them, so you would not recognise them as ranunculi. We were supposed to go and visit my parents in France over New Year, and unfortunately, because of the situation with Omicron, the French government decided that they weren't going to allow in British travellers, and so we had to cancel our trip. But we are hoping to go later this year, and I was thinking it would be a really fun thing to do, to maybe speak to Mum when I'm over there about her ranunculi. She doesn't know this. She's hearing about this for the first time. Hi, Mum. But I thought that would be a really fun thing to do. So maybe that's something to look forward to later on in 2022. Okay, my loves, we are nearly at the end, which is just as well because we've been going for an hour and 23 minutes. So I'm just going to run through a few things that's been bringing me joy, and then I've got a poem to see us out. So Frank and I finished watching Around the World in 80 Days, which is a really cool BBC show that I think is maybe done in collaboration with a French company as well. But that was a lot of fun. So if you've not seen that yet, it's on BBC iPlayer. Certainly in the UK it is anyway, and that was a lot of fun. It stars David Tennant, It's lively, it's about travel. If you've not been travelling for a long time, then it might really appeal to you as well. But really it's about the growth that can occur when we move outside of our comfort zones. So I really enjoyed that and I recommend that. I've got 3 Instagram accounts that I've been following that have been bringing me a lot of joy. One is called Poetry is Not a Luxury, which has lots of poems on it and a wide variety of them. I'm finding a lot of poems there, discovering a lot of poems there. Another one is called Accidentally Wes Anderson, which is wonderfully whimsical, and the images are amazing and the stories that accompany them are just fabulous, and that's a real delight, that Instagram account. And the last one is Colour Palette Cinema, which I think I've mentioned before, but Colour Palette Cinema will take an image, a still from a movie, and then it will take all of the different colours out of that still and line them all up so you can see what colours were used in that particular image. It really inspires me in the way in which I put colours together, and so in the ways in which colour can surprise and delight and capture your interest. So if you're looking for some colour inspiration, Colour Palette Cinema might be a good Instagram account to follow. On YouTube, I've been enjoying a few podcasts that I wanted to share with you. Ancestral Craft is a brand new podcast, only 1 episode up, with the lovely Alex, and she is based not too far away from me. So hello, Alex. She is a gardener and she started knitting in the lockdown, which is just amazing because her knitting is absolutely beyond the beyond. It's beautiful. She likes to work with very natural fibres and is a fan of Mittens, which you might remember I was working with, must have been around about this time last year when I was creating my soiree sweater in Mittens yarn, creating a fade. So she's lovely. I recommend that you check out her podcast. I also watched Little Fern Fibres. Hello Ellie, if you're watching. She is working on a wonderful project where she is spinning wolf fur into a yarn, which is then going to be made into various different items, which will then be auctioned as part of a charity. And the whole project just absolutely blew my mind, and what she was able to create with that was just so phenomenal. So just really interesting things happening in knitting. I also participated in the Caddy Jacks bingo night. That was a huge amount of fun. Lots of people turned up. Everybody who's a patron of the Caddy Jacks Knits podcast gets an invite. And it's always a really good opportunity to go back over your knits, but also to see everybody else's knits. And it's really just a joyful moment or joyful couple of hours actually, to be able to see people so excited about their creativity and about their craft, and sharing it with a like-minded community that also takes delight in creativity. So that was really joyous, and I really enjoyed that evening. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you was the Cafe Facet interviews on fruity knitting. So it's divided over 2 episodes. The second episode came out, I think it was possibly on Christmas, but that was really lovely. That was excellent, and that's a lovely thing to sit and enjoy all this talk about creativity and what it means to live a creative life. Okay, so my goodness, so we're finishing up now with a poem, and the poem that I want to finish us off with is called The Summer Day. Now, I know we're in winter, but it made me think as well of that Albert Camus quote about finding inside oneself an invincible summer. So here we have The Summer Day, and the reason why I'm sharing this is because I think at the beginning of a year people make lots of plans, and like I've shown you, but they set themselves targets or resolutions, and this poem can quite often get, or the last couple of lines of it can quite often get used in order to galvanise, I suppose, that creation of targets and showing up for our life and doing all these things. And that might not be the place where you are right now, and that's fine. Because actually what I think this poem speaks to more is this sense of agape, about creating, about generating wonder in our life and being present to what is. And we see that when we hear the whole poem. So, The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who's flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So, my loves, I will leave you there. I'm wishing you the capacity to develop and explore wonder in all its forms, to engage with your life and your creativity with great love and gentleness and kindness, and wishing you all a wonderful new year. May 2022 be good to you, and I will see you in the next few weeks. Okay, my loves.